and welcome to Smash Writing. Today, we are up to Phantasm 4 Oblivion. One step closer. One more to go after this, and the end of the line for Phantasm. Until that day, though, let's dive in and talk about Phantasm 4, shall we? This movie opens up with Mike driving a hearse, and the tall man is on the move. We get flashbacks of the series up to this point, and we get Reggie as a narrator. He's talking that Mike has been on the run, and Reggie is still pinned to the wall, and that's where we open up. And but to his surprise, the tall man just lets him go. He calls back all the spheres and goes off, telling him that the end of the careful with how you play. The end of the game is approaching. And we jump back to Mike. He's moving southeast. He's having a flashback to Mike and Jody out for a drive back before the first movie, and they actually had seen the tall man entering town, looking as grumpy as ever. He actually runs over a dog in this process too. So, just in case you didn't like him already, he runs over a doggo. Mike is beginning to suffer hallucinations as well. He's hallucinating people in the back. He's hallucinating the psychic in the passenger seat. He's still in mid-transformation and still feeling the effects of what has been done to him. And we jump back to Reggie, who's changing the tires on his Cuda. He's being spied on by a sphere, and it turns out, it's Jody. Jody wants him to go find Mike, and Reggie is done. He's done. He's like, he abandoned me. I am tired. I want to go home. I'm done with this. But, of course, Reggie's going to follow along. Because it's Mike, and he's not going to abandon Mike. I said southeast. They're heading southwest, not southeast. But he's going. Reggie's going to follow along. And that's where we're going to leave Reggie for a little bit. We'll be back to Reggie toward the end. We jump to Mike, who is still driving off when his car is taken over by the tall man. The tall man's in the back seat. He's like, you're going to go where I want you to go. And that appears to be toward Death Valley. He wakes up the next day in the middle of the desert. His car is disabled. And he starts to walk. And he starts finding little creatures around. He retreats back to the coffin and inside. He retreats back to the hearse, finding a casket inside of it that just says an empty suit, despite the fact the tall man had vanished through there earlier. And he writes a letter to Reg explaining that he has a plan that's going to enact tomorrow, and he hopes that it's going to work. And later that night, while he's asleep, he has a nightmare of a war with the tall man standing above him, working on him. And when he wakes up, he actually tries to hang himself. And it flashes back while he's doing that, and it flashes back to the time where him and Jody trapped the tall man in the noose from the first movie, but that's not how that happened. There was a mine shaft in the first movie, but in this movie they're saying it was a hanging. But later that night, he goes back to check on the tall man to make sure he's gone. He's not, of course. The tall man promises that if he cuts him down, he will leave and never be heard of again. So Mike cuts him down, as of course he does. And we jump back to adult Mike, who gets cut down by the tall man, telling him death is not an exit from him. He has plans, and it will not be that easy to escape him. And he contemplates just taking his hand, but he sees the two forks again, and he runs toward them, ignoring the warning from the tall man that you might want to be careful. You might find what you're looking for. And what he finds on the other side of it is this contraption in this little office run at the funeral home parlor by a sweet tall man who calls himself Jebediah Morningside. Jebediah Morningside. He has lemonade, and he asks if he came through the dimensional fork, and he has all these questions. Mike doesn't give him any answers. There's actually the psychic lady there too. But Mike's not answering any questions. He runs back inside, he gets the device going, and he goes back through the portal, back to the desert, where he finds even more metal forks waiting on the other side in the desert. So he comes up with another plan that night. And he makes, using, while he's constructing this thing out of his car parts, he tells his brother Jody, who shows up, I could trust Reggie, I'm not so sure I trust you, though. And it's starting to build a bit of friction between brothers. But we find out what Mike has been working on, and that is a silver sphere of his own. We'll go back to Reggie now. All this time, Reggie's mostly just driving here. He has a run-in with a zombie cop that pulls him over, and he takes him out, and he uses a flare to blow up everything. Then he actually doesn't pick up the blonde at first. He ends up picking her up after she wrecks her car, and they stay at this abandoned hotel where her chest turns into 2 silver spheres, and he has to fight them off, but he gets his hand injured, and then he is on his way back to Southwest. That's Reggie's arc so far in this story. Back with Mike, though, he can control his own silver sphere. He's learning that he has a bit of control over the things that the tall man has, like the silver spheres. One more thing I missed about Reggie. Reggie did learn that his tuning fork, when hit, emits a sound that blows up the spheres. Later that night, he calls upon Jody again, and he tells Jody he wants to go back to when this all started, and he wants to stop the tall man where it all began. And that goes back to Jebediah Morningwood. And we find out that through all of his work as the Undertaker, it's interested him in what happens next. And he created the dimensional forks to allow him to enter the next plane and see the afterlife for himself. And he goes into the tuning forks as Jebediah, and he comes back out of them as the tall man. And while Jebediah couldn't see them, the tall man can. So he goes after them, but they escape through the forks. And Mike is waiting there for Jody, and Jody does attack him. Mike fights him off, but is attacked by another Jody after he takes out the first Jody. And they go crashing through the door, and Mike is strapped to a table, and once again, he's being held down by Jody, and the tall man's trying to stick him with the sphere, but he sticks Jody with the sphere itself, and he manages to escape because of the tuning fork, for how the tuning fork freezes him up. Which happened after Reggie arrived, which I fucking skipped. Reggie does arrive that night, in between him seeing Jebediah the first time and going back to Jebediah. Reggie does show up, and he fights off a bunch of the little gremlins before reuniting with Mike and Jody. Too many J names now. I was already getting Mike and Jody mixed up. That's how Mike had the tuning fork. But he manages to escape back to Mike. Mike manages to escape back to Reggie. And a few moments later, the tall man arrives. And he goes right after them both. He flicks aside Reggie like it's nothing, and he goes after Mike. And Mike is ready for it, and he tries to use his own sphere, which doesn't necessarily work, but the device that the sphere was in kind of lures the tall man in and blows up the hearse and the tall man with him. But it's to no prevail as the tall man comes back through the doors, ready for round 2. And this time he takes down Mike, and he removes the sphere that's in Mike's head and goes through the door, leaving Mike dying on the ground. Reggie's freaking out, promising he's gonna help him, he's gonna go get him, and I'll make him undo all of this. And Reggie goes through the doors himself, and we cut to Mike, and we go back into one more flashback of him driving in the ice cream truck with Reggie, and we drive off into blackness and meet the credits. And that is Phantasm 4 Oblivion. Oh boy, this movie. Surprisingly, the going back and forth isn't as painful as I've made it sound. It's just so much of Reggie, nothing really happens. You can cut out all of the blonde stuff and not miss anything really except for the tuning fork. And all of that could have happened way back with the cop. And we could have just focused this story all on Mike and all in learning stuff about the tall man, because that was actually interesting. I really liked seeing Angus playing Jebediah, this nice, friendly, upbeat guy, which is such a difference from the tall man performance. He did great at both of them. I just wish we got to see a little bit more of Jebediah here. There were some really good scenes, especially when Reggie's shooting the one creature without looking, and then he's pretending he didn't notice him until the last moment and then fired. That was a great shot, and I really like the fact they showed a bit more of the weakness, because Reggie kept getting tackled there toward the end because of how long it takes you to reload a quad barrel shotgun. So I like that little bit of realism with that scene. Is like, yeah, that's impressive, and will take down a lot of things, just until you have to reload, and then it's a pain in the ass. Jody's heel turn cut was fine. It's a bit sudden, but you can understand that. He's been dealing with the tall man for all of these years. So it's understandable that the Jody sphere would go bad eventually. And this ending was a bit better because it didn't give us a definitive ending. Granted, I would have liked him to not say the end game is upon us if it's not upon us. Because we ended with that cliffhanger of, will Mike die? Will Mike be okay? Where's Reggie going? What's going to happen? But if you're going to do a cliffhanger, that's the way to do a cliffhanger, I guess. Everything up in the air and promises of one more to come. And there's one more to go. As for part 4, though, I'm going to give part 4 a B. Solid B. It was a good time. I had a fun with it. It was enjoyable. B's fine. B's good. Great. And that's going to end this one. And upon us is the end of the line. As always, I hope you enjoyed and have a good day. Bye-bye.